Okay, there we go. Now we got a mic. Hello. We don't have a little stream deck thing. I forgot to do that. Oh well. How you doing?
Hello. Happy Sunday.
Different location now. We're home. We came home to stream our campfire jam last night. Went pretty well. More out of tune singing and stuff. All right. So, tell you be in and out maybe. We're in our family room here. So let's do a little review of the jazz chords. All right. So, what is a jazz chord? Jazz chords gets its name from jazz guitar players or jazz chord players. Back in the 30s and 40s, they were playing the fancy chords. The 40s and 50s, the folk boom, they were playing the simple chords, so they called anything really sophisticated or fancy, more than just 3 notes, jazz chords, right? They're basically, we just can take our open position chords and convert those to our 4-part chords. We use a 7th chord to base all of our more advanced 4-part chords on. And they are the C7 I just showed, the A7, G7, E7. All those are refingered and you move them up the neck. So if I took this F7, and F7 is the chord that we sort of build everything on. And then last week we did minor, a couple weeks ago I guess, we turned them into minor 7s and major 7s. And those are really basically the chords we need a lot of the 7s, major 7s, and minor 7s. So it's good practice to do them all in the same position. Luckily on the ukulele, we only have 1 set of 4 strings, so it becomes very manageable compared to guitar with theoretically 15 sets of 4 strings. There'd be 60 of these, but they have to do at least 20 to really hit most musical situations. We find ourselves a lot of times in, if we're doing chords and melody at the same time, we'll find ourselves in, whoops, hold on, we hit the right cameras. We'll find ourselves doing free-form chords where we just have to know the notes of the chords and figure them out. So we then went and identified the individual notes of the 7th chords, the root, the 5th, the 3rd, the flat 7. This allows us to lower the 3rd, get the minor 7, raise the flat 7 to the natural 7, a major 7. So we have our F minor 7, our F major 7, and our F7. And just all the work is really getting your fingers to do it. This is that wacky E chord everybody talks about, hard to play. You get that same situation with this major 7. It sounds really pretty used in context. Strumming, it actually doesn't sound that great if you strum it. It has an interval, wacky interval inside that we have to deal with. All right, so we did that with every one of these F7 chords, located the root, right? We can do it no matter where you're at. You would locate the root, the 5th, the 3rd, and the flat 7. F7, this would be fret 5, right? We did it with the chord that had the root on string 1, so F is at fret 8, so we have F7 up at fret 8, the root, the 5th, the 3rd, and the flat 7. Or you can get to the notes, F, A, C, E flat. The quicker you get to the notes, the easier some of this stuff gets. And then you can go back and forth between the intervals. Because the intervals are actually in the chord name also. If somebody says, oh, let's play F9, well, I know I can take my F7 and raise the root 2 frets, and I automatically have my F9. Right, so those 7th chords are the foundation for all of our 4-part chords. All right, and here's all 4 of those F7s. These are your foundation that if all else fails, you can always go back to your F7 and build from that. And as you get better, the intermediate steps get eliminated and you can quickly get to the chord you're looking for. Some chords you'll actually build them on the fly. So let's hide that again so you can see our gorgeous faces.
Oh, we have somebody watching from Italy.
Italy.
And Tony is in Maine right now.
So we did the same thing. Here's all 4 F major 7s. Here's all 4 F minor 7. They end up being the big 3 of the big 6. And here's F minor 7 flat 5, or half diminished chord. In certain harmonic situations, one of the names is right, the other name is wrong. All right. So I think last week we did a 2-5, like a satin doll kind of thing. We go with my camera. We did like a very common chord progression. Turns out in music, majority of our chord progressions are going to be based off of the major scale with the chords coming out of the major scale, and we would call that full diatonic. And in the major scale, C major as the example, C is the 1 chord, C major or C major 7. D minor is the 2 chord, D minor or D minor 7. Right? E minor is the 3 chord, it's the minor chord, or E minor 7. You can even get partials. You don't have to actually have all the notes. Just need the important notes, which is the subject of another topic. So we can do the topic right now. If we go back to the F7, you'll notice when I flip through these, the root and the fifth of these chords did not change. So if you can locate the root and the fifth, we'll use the first F7 as an example. The fifth is on string 1 at fret 3, and the root is on string 2 at fret 1. Now keep an eye on that one, those 2 notes. That's the F and the C. It did not change on the major 7, it did not change on the minor 7. Now the minor 7 flat 5, the fifth does change. So go back and take a look at the second chord, the F7. The root and the fifth are on the lower strings towards your nose. Keep an eye on those. They will not change. All right, they moved up just to show the chord. All right, you go back again, we see the F7 with the root on string 1, the root and the fifth. They have the same relationship as the root and the fifth of the chord to the left of it. Notice it will not change. It stays same relationship. As long as the tuning stays the same, and then finally the third one, the root and the fifth, are both together, and these voicings are always on adjacent strings. And they don't change. So the root and the fifth are pretty common between these 3 chords, but it actually means the thirds and the flat 7s, they are what give the chord their color, right? You could actually play at the camera. The root and the fifth are not going to really tell you much, but the third and the flat 7 are. Right? They really are the color tones of the chord, very important. And you keep that in mind when we can't get all the notes on the chords. So really you want to memorize all these chords. The 7s, the major 7s, the minor 7, that is your really big foundation. And the minor 7 flat 5. And you'll notice I went through 4 of the big 6, and it turns out the diminished 7th chord, that's another one. But that, honestly, I don't memorize it. I memorize the shape. I know the notes of the neck. And any one of these notes that my finger is on is the name of that chord. So in this case here, this could be A flat diminished 7 or G sharp, A flat more common, D diminished 7, F diminished 7, B diminished 7. So I move my fingers up and you know the notes of the neck, which is key. You can just find these chords really easy. You actually don't have to memorize it. You memorize one thing, the shape. And then the 7 sharp 5, the augmented. You know that root and fifth, you got the sharp 5. You got the sharp 5, sharp 5. You're doing pretty fast, pretty quick. So now all this stuff too is in now a word from our sponsor. It's me, so it's not the sponsor.
LearningUkulele.com.
Yeah, LearningUkulele.com, the most comprehensive ukulele site in the world. So these are a lot of my chord books that I've written. The 2 in the middle, A Guide to Advanced Chords for Ukulele, gives you a detailed text version of how to get through these. What's that? What are you doing?
I was lip syncing what you were saying.
Lip syncing?
Because you can't see your face.
Okay, yeah. And exploring jazz chords.
Other way.
Exploring jazz. Kelly usually hides behind the graphics.
I know, because we're split today. We're not in our normal seats.
That's right. We are different, aren't we? Yeah, no wonder. Yeah, I'm gonna. Wow.
I'm usually on the right.
Kelly's left-handed, so she's facing the right way. She should be that way.
But I play regular.
Yeah, she does, right? Yeah. So exploring jazz chords actually takes standard chord progressions and explores them for you. Goes through and gives you one way to play them. A couple songs I put 2 different ways to play them. They're really good. A guide to chords for blues, the Blue Book, that's a really good one. That goes through and gives you detailed information on the actual chord substitutions I did. And finally, but just learn the notes of the neck. Things are so much easier when you know them. And you can actually, it's one of the few things you can do away from the instrument. Now, on to common chord progressions. I think in week 2, we talked about taking a 5 chord. Now, let's try this out. Here's what a 5 chord is. We're going to do a...
Oh, wait, did you mention if you get your Forever membership, you can download every book?
Yeah, if you do sign up for learningukulele.com, pay for the Forever membership, never deal with a membership again. I have a sale right now going on, $149. You might think, oh, that's a lot. No, it's not $1.49. $149. And you get all my books. You can download all my books. I've written like over 40-some books now or so. Most of them ukulele at this point. There's play-along tracks, premium play-along tracks, one of a kind, that you can download for free, play along with them, and lots of songs. And there's over 600 lessons up there. And you can jump to queue and asking me questions, email me, I'll answer questions and stuff like that. So, I'm going to try this here. PDF. Well, the PDMac then when I said PDF. How to remember chord progressions. Here's a good way to remember these, because a lot of numbers are going to be bantered around. So, we'll start with a simple chord progression, 3-chord chord progression. If a song only has 3 chords, chances are it's going to be what we call the primary chords of a key. So chord progressions are made up of the songs within within a scale. In the case of C major, it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And then if we number them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we get the notes position within that scale. That helps us for other things. But ultimately, a chord, if we took every other note of the scale and stacked them up into 3 notes, we'd end up with a C chord, major, on the first chord. Now, majors are the most common chord type, so we don't have to say or play the word say major. D minor, the second chord, is a minor chord, D minor. These are triads. E minor is the 3rd. F is the 4th. Kelly's playing them. G is the 5th. A minor is the 6th, and there's the rare diminished. Now, nobody plays a diminished unless they're playing triads and soloing or something. You'll play a diminished 7th. It's pretty rare. It doesn't really show up in major chord progressions at all. And some of you might be saying, wait a second, I played diminished 7th chords a lot. And we'll get to that. But these are chord progressions that all the chords come from the key. So, the common chord progressions, the common keys are C, G, D, A, and E. And as ukulele players, we can throw F in there also. C is very common between rock, folk, and pop country. G is common. Now these keys are all based off actually the guitar being used to be, still is probably the most common chord progression. But when ukulele world domination finally succeeds, we'll be able to throw F and B flat in as common keys. So the primary chord is the 1, the 4, and the 5. They're all major chords, and they are the primary chords in those keys. Now here's a really good way to, let me go down again. Common jazz keys. C is common between both of them. F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G is a common key between pop, rock, and jazz. You'll notice they're flat keys. They were based on the horns and big bands of the 30s and 40s before the guitar took over. And this is a PDF from the lesson, learningukulele.com, that you can download. I'm just scrolling through it. Graphics. I do all the graphics too. Went to art school. So here's all 15 major keys. You memorize these. You might be saying to yourself, man, you're nuts. How am I going to memorize all that? Well, you don't. There's some little tips and tricks. Hey, the next page has tips and tricks. Wow, what a coincidence. Here's tips for remembering chords. Now, one thing's really nice about these 5 common keys, C, G, D, A, and E. You memorize that, or if you've been working on memorizing the cycle of 5ths and 4ths, that is the first going around clockwise, C, G, D, A, E. You'll memorize that. But it's 5 notes we have to memorize. The first 5 of every major scale will give us the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and we're interested in the fourth and the fifth. So we can, on our fingers, just use our fingers to identify the chords. So in the key of C, we can start on a thumb and say C, D, E, F is the fourth, G is the fifth. So C is the 1, F is the fourth, and G is the fifth. They're primary chords. They would be majors. We play them a lot. C, F, and G's. Now, if we did jazz chords, 4-part chords, that'd be C major 7, F major 7, and then G7 in the key of C. So that's actually somewhat rare to play a basic 1-4, 1-5 progression using jazz chords. They get a little more sophisticated. Now, the next key is G. And on your fingers again, you have G's 1, A2, B3, and then we have C and D as the fourth and the fifth, C, G, D. And in those first couple keys, you actually get the right letters from the scale just by accident. The next key, D is the 1, E is the 2. It's actually an F sharp, but we're not interested in the third. G and A. So you can get the 1, 4, and 5 on your fingers and memorize those, all right? It helps. There's the common keys. So you actually, I don't know, that might even be a reason why they're really common other than the chords.
You have to hear things like 10 times and then it clicks.
Yeah, I was a write it down and rewrite it kind of learner. And you put it into a graphic context. Now, you actually sort of say the wrong names when you get into the D, G, and E chords because you actually want to say the major scale to get the chords and not have to rely on like magic finger tricks.
So you can't stand up on stage and they say we're playing a key of D and you go D,
and
E.
so you could only do this for C, G, D, A, and E. And later on you can do it for the keys of C sharp and C flat, which we'll never play in because you just flat everything you said. C flat, F flat, G flat. C sharp, F sharp, G sharp. But you rarely play in those keys. I never had. If you do, you put a capo on and it's the same thing. So this is what the PDFs look when you download them. They're very good printed out, very nice. 2014. A lot of stuff goes back. And the price always says $9.95 for everything, but it's not really But this is actually something that you might get in the span of 2, 3, 4 lessons or something. So we do cram a lot of material into
the videos.
Workshops, yes. More than you can handle in one session.
But that's because you can always pause and
so there's the C major scale. Now, the C major scale, we're dealing with 4-part chords, so we have to add a 4th note. So I always tell students to learn this mantra for our basic triads, the 4-part chords. So if we looked at the C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, and the B diminished, and we just only said the chord type and not the letters, we would get major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. So you turn that into a chant or a little mantra that you're going to do. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, right? So now that is triads. Now the first 4-part chord that showed up was the 7th chord built on the 5th scale degree. In this case, it would be G7. So you'd have major, minor, minor, major, major, or 7th, minor, and then diminished. Now, if these are 4-part chords, they get turned into, the majors get turned into a major 7, except for the G, stays G7, and the minors become minor 7. So we have C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, and G7, A minor 7. Now, in this case of the major scale, the correct name of the 7th scale degrees chord is B half diminished 7, right? Ooh. Commonly written in minor 7 flat 5 though, and this cat is so rare you'll rarely run across it. All right, so that is the actually one of the lessons. Right now we're going to jazz it up, common chord progressions. We had talked about in one of the workshops of taking the 5 to the 1. In this case, C, D, E, F, G is the 5. 1 is C to make it a major chord. There's C to G7. make it C major 7 to G7. Now this is where it gets challenging on the ukulele, and it's more work for you, but it's like increasing your vocabulary. It just, you know, when you first learn a new big word or a word you're going to use, wow, this is great. And the first couple times you use it, it just doesn't sound right. It's like, what the heck? Who invented that word? Right? But after a while, it becomes
either use it wrong or awkwardly say it.
So you have C major 7 to G7. Right? So C major 7, G7. Oh, it's not C major, C major 7, G7. And do voice leading. So the first C major 7 is actually the open position. Right? So the B is common and the G is common. So, all right. Then I have this one. So you notice the notes are rising that are not common. So the common notes stay the same. You might have to refinger it. Right? So I have the C major 7. G7 here. Then you go, yeah, we have no light. We have no lights here and stuff like that. So, and then you could do 7s to 7s. You could do C7 to G7. You could do G7 to C minor 7. So you mix them up, right?
The brightness was down on all my stuff. It wasn't the video.
It could be here
me.
too. I haven't done that here too. The screen, yeah.
Oops.
Right. So the most common movement in music, in Western music, is the 5 chord called the dominant chord to the 1 chord called the tonic. So you get this dominant tonic resolution, this cyclical pattern that chords are restless. They usually fall under the dominant category, and they want to go home to the chords that fall under the tonic or the one chord. Then everything beyond that is actually just expansions of that. So if we took that 5-1, G7 to C7, we could take any one of our triads that had an E in it, and we could do E minor 7 to G7. It'll sound somewhat the same. We can take A minors and play A minor to G7. And I'm picking the chords that have an E in it, so in my mind, I'm actually spelling the chords. The E minor, I know, well, it has an E, and it's in its name, right? That's easy. Yep. So it's E, G, B. And A minor, A, C, E has an E in it. And we throw the diminished out. We don't even care about the diminished.
Back
so
to the notes.
We're dealing with 6 chords, yeah. Now, when you get past the 3rd fret, that's when you have to memorize these. And we make them 7s, though, like E minor 7, G7. Notice only one note changed. So I might remember that. Oh, wow. E minor 7 to G7. I only had to change the E to the F. So if I find E minor 7 up here, change the E to the F. So again, the notes is like, I'm sorry, you always hear it from me. Harping and harping.
Like a buzzer or an alarm every time we...
Yeah. Pay me a nickel every time I say learn the notes of the night.
Oh, God. You'd be rich.
Right. So that's sort of taking a little bit of chord substitution where that comes through. It's not really diving into it at all. But then the next movement we can do in major, really, really common, we did it last lesson, was 2/5s. And here we're going to resolve the 2/5 to the 1. So we can take actually what we did with the satin dial. So let's do D minor 7. Let's do it up here. D minor 7 is bar fret 5. G7 is the E, F7 moved up to fret 3, 4, 5. I actually go by where the root is. This is G7, so D minor 7, fret 5 bar to G7. You actually only move 2 notes. Like if you notice these 2 here, I barred fret 5 and I moved to the G7. These 2 notes stayed at fret 5, and I had to lower my C to the B, and my F stayed, and I lowered my G, my A to the G. Right? So D minor 7, common tones remain. This is called voice leading. The common tones remain, and the other notes move. And then no ukulele, we have to refinger them. So this is a 2/5, D minor 7, G7, and we're going to go to C major 7.
Someone asked anything for baritone uke. I don't know if they mean in this workshop or if we'll be doing future baritone
I'm just calling out this kinds of stuff. It doesn't matter what instrument you're doing. This would actually be the same workshop that I would do for a guitar player learning 4-part chords. They would just have more to do. A baritone, because notice I'm saying you can play any D minor 7. At this point here, when you have those 4-part chords, you have 4 voicings for each chord. No longer do you rely on a chord being dictated of which one to play. If somebody says play D minor 7, you now have 4 voicings that you can play for D minor 7.
So just knowing the notes of the neck for the baritone.
And knowing these chords, knowing the same thing, knowing the notes of the neck for the baritone becomes really easy. I transferred a lot of my skills from what I learned on the guitar to the ukulele, and it was only because I knew this. Otherwise, I had to go and memorize shapes, new names. Now, I knew when I really transitioned to the ukulele was you get messed up when you jump between instruments initially. You would like play this on the baritone, and you're thinking it's a D chord, and it is, right? So then you jump to the ukulele and you play it, and it's a G. Now, when you go, at some point, you're going to hit the point where you'll jump to the baritone, and you'll think that this is a G, when it's not. That's, when you switched.
Yeah.
It happened with guitar. I grabbed this on my guitar, and I think I'm playing a G, but wait a second, that's not the ukulele. So you have to do a mind shift. But the chords, the patterns, the 2-5-1 part of this, the numbers, the movement and sound, that doesn't change. It stays the same regardless of the instrument.
Do you know the notes of the neck for the baritone as well as regular?
Yep, that's the guitar. Yeah,
like it's quick. Yeah.
Yep, that's quick. Yep. The mandolin, I don't.
4 strings.
I do. I'm a super beginner on mandolin because it's upside down, low 4 strings of the guitar, so I can figure it out. But figuring out takes too long. Yeah. So I cannot play. I know piano. Super beginner on piano. I can teach beginners, because I have the sort of the
Music
knowledge
theory.
of teaching and stuff like that, but I have no technique. Like if I go to say, I'm going to play one of the fancy songs I know, like I'm going to play Satin Dial, D minor 7, G7. If I go to the piano, I got to think, the FAC, okay, I got them quick, right? So
And
I have no technique.
Put the time into
I don't have the time. Not enough lifetime. The fellow I studied with once asked Andres Segovia. And Andres Segovia has played this theater in the round in Pennsylvania called the Valley Forge Music Fair. And who I studied with, Chuck, he was the staff guitarist in their orchestra there. So when Segovia showed up, of course, they didn't need the band. So Segovia gave Chuck like 30 tickets or something to give to his students. I was busy, I couldn't go. But he asked Segovia, because Chuck was a virtuoso jazz guitarist, educator, and he started to dive into classical guitar, but using a pick, stuff like that. So he asked Segovia, what would it take to, I'm pretty good at the guitar, virtuoso, like people consider me, all this knowledge. And Segovia basically said, not enough lifetimes to master 2 instruments at the highest level. Right? So stuck with the pick on the classical steel string. But yeah, it's a lot of work. Like I could not finger pick on the ukulele when I picked it up. I could do simple stuff like this. This was it, like a bossa nova thing. I could do that. I did not finger pick. I could do this. But I could not legitimately do a different finger picking. So I had to really spend a lot of years trying to master that. Because I used a pick on the guitar. So the technique part is the hardest part of all this. Getting your fingers to go to where your musical mind sort of knows. So 2-5-1, take a simple progression. Now say you can master these F7s, that could be your choice to say, okay, I know my F7 really well. So what would be the 2 chord for my F7? This is where you need a chart initially. Say, okay, so I find F7 is the 5 chord in the key of B flat. So that means I could take F and go to B flat major 7. So I do F7. Now I find the 2 chord of the F7. That's C minor 7, F7, B flat 7. I write that down on a piece of paper, or a teacher would write it in a book. Say, okay, do that 4 places. I have the C minor 7, F7, B flat major 7. C minor 7, F7, B flat major 7. Now, initially, this is a long process, all right? So you have to just put the time in, put the time in. It's guaranteed, or as they say in New Orleans, guaranteed you'll get results. Now you can make it a minor resolution. I could take the C minor 7, F7, and resolve to B flat minor 7 instead of B flat major 7. All right. Now you can also do a minor 7 flat 5 for a true minor resolution, B flat minor 7 flat 5, F7. Now usually you would alter that some way into the B minor 7. Then there'll be a third 2-5-1. It starts out minor 7 flat 5. It starts out as a minor 2-5, but then it resolves major. Now actually have a fancy name for that called a Picardy third. Because back in the hundreds of years ago, church dictated the music. The Roman Catholic Church, Protestant churches, they sort of dictated the music. And they didn't, the minors are very dark and haunting. Ooh, they don't like dark and haunting things, church. They like bright, happy things, you know. So they decreed that you could not end a song on a minor chord. It was too depressing. So everything had to end major. So they create. So if you wanted it, you did a minor 7, flat 5 kind of thing, to an altered 7th chord, and you resolved it major. They call that a Picardy third. Fancy name. These names too help you identify stuff later on. Like I know several chord progressions that have that movement in it, and that's how you can remember it, by the numbers. Because there's way too many songs to memorize strict chord progressions. These numbers help. They help so much so that in Nashville they use Arabic numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it'd be like the number 5 to the number 1 up there instead of the Roman numerals. Classical music, they weren't really chord-based where you sat on a chord a lot, but they did adopt this number system. And they'll use lowercase numbers depending on whether it is major or minor, which is sort of redundant.
Did you say lowercase numbers?
Yeah, lowercase Roman numerals. They'll use a small V, a small I. They'll use a capital I for the 1 chord. They'll use a lowercase 2. Now, when you get into this, though, you know a D minor 7 in the key of C is minor, so it's redundant to write a lowercase 2. So this is pretty sort of new evolutionary stuff that very few people do it, but uppercase Roman numerals, because you know at this point when you're doing this, you know the chord type of the chords in the common keys and common scales, right? So major, minor, 2-5-1, super common. Now, it actually goes back to that 5-1. The 2 is a direct substitute for the 5, right? So the C minor 7, you know, you can, in fact, if you altered the F7th enough, if you raise the root of an F 2 frets, you would get a 9th. And if I raise the 3rd of the F, I'd get an 11th, and I have a C minor 7. Now, the bass player would play an F, so this would come out as F11. It wouldn't come out as C minor 7. It's that classic ukulele thing. Yes, somebody plays the open strings. Say, what chord is that? You know. Some people will say, oh, A minor 7. You know, or some will say C6. You know, and I always just say, ask the bass player. If he plays a C, it's C6. If he plays an A, it's A minor 7.
Trick question.
Yeah, it is a trick question. It could be anything. 7th chords altered, and 7th chords, they're the craziest ones. You could alter every note in a 7th chord other than the flat 7 of the chord and justify the name of that chord just by flat 9s, sharp 11s, all kinds of stuff. All right? So at the top of this screen, the 5-1, that is our dominant tonic harmony in Western music, based off of the major and minor scales. The next 2 we just did, the 2-5-1s. Just pick a key a week. Right? The understanding of this is the easy part. Getting it under your fingers and getting your musical thinking so you can do this fast is the hard part. So the 4th one down is a 1-6-2-5. So I moved the 2 and the 5 to the end, and the 1 would be like a C major. Right, the 6, if we took the major scale, which has no sharps or flats, you can use your fingers. You know, C, D, E, F, G, A is the 6th, and the 6th chord in the major scale is minor, so that means A minor, 4-part chord, A minor 7. So C major 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7. Now, that sounds pretty fancy. Now, if I do this strum, if I strum it like a triplet and go back to triads, it's a famous doo-wop chord progression, they call it. All right. So then, again, now in the open position, there's one way to play it. You know, C major 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7. Move up and get the next voicing. C major 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7. You can do voice leading, or you can move it up. C major 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7. I would actually do the voice leading first, and then sort of jump around. It's your decision now. As soon as you see a chord progression that lists a C major 7, now you have more than one choice. Right? So you go all the way up, C major 7s. Oh, I did this one here. C major 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7. Don't worry about timing either. Just sort of learn the progression. Check the chord. A minor 7, D minor 7, G7. If you know the C major scale, you can add those notes. All right, it's pretty chord progression. Nice ballad. All right. Now we get into chords that do not fall, common progressions that do not fall into the full diatonic where all the chords came out of the C major scale. So we can play C major 7, because we want to use like the diminished chords. So I need C diminished 7. Here's C. The little degree sign means diminished. It's a shorthand. So I need diminished 7. So I grab my shape that has the root on string 1. Here's C. So this is a true diminished chord. So C major 7, then D minor 7. So I get to reuse everything I did with the D minor 7 to the G7. C major 7. D minor 7. That was the diminished 7. G7. All right. So diminished 7. This is actually a true diminished 7th chord. Right? And usually piano players, guitar players, if you write these chords out for them, they will play chords that actually have the root as the lowest note. They should. So they would play a C major 7 with C as the lowest note, and then they do C diminished 7 with C as the lowest note, and then D minor 7. So they get this nice automatic sort of root movement dictated by whoever wrote the chord progression out. Now, the next one is C major again. I keep going for substitutions. We're not doing a lot of that yet. C major 7. Now C sharp diminished 7. That's moving up. The D minor 7 to the G7. These are like a lot of old-timey progressions also. So like
the chord charts for all this?
There is no chord chart. I would need how many different chord charts for all these, right? That's what Kelly asked. Once you get into these chords, the chord chart is not, it has the chords listed and maybe the name like C major 7, C sharp diminished 7, D minor 7, G7. You see the chord names there, but there will be no chord grids because that's up to you. Because in fact, once you do this, you can ignore the chord grids in songs that have chord grids because you are making the choice. Yeah. Chord grids are written, there's a history of chord grids. That would be a trivia question. So I'm going to give the answer now. So that when we do our Funky Frets TV show every Wednesday, this will be one of the trivia questions. So if you take this workshop, you might know the answer when we finally spring it. But what instrument were chord grids, where did they first show up? The little boxes with the notes in it and stuff. And the answer is the ukulele. Oh. Because back in the early
it was a trick
20s, my grandmother told me this, that the piano was the most common instrument, the piano. In fact, so common that your local 5 and dime store, like a Woolworths or something, they would have a piano player in the store playing the piano and playing the hits of the day that was on the radio. And you would buy the sheet music and you'd run home and there'd be a piano arrangement, equivalent of tab, but they could read the notes. And there'd be a pre-written arrangement that you could play the hits of the day, and they would sound like the song because it had the melody and the chords, and you could play it instrumentally and it would sound like the song. So you bought your music from the 5 and dime store. Well, the ukulele became pretty big in the 20s. It was the first craze of the ukulele. And they felt really left out. They couldn't run to the 5 and dime and buy the sheet music because it just had the notes. And as we know, even to this day, the little black dots on the music, the melody and those notes, they scare ukulele players. Right, because you have to learn to read it. You even get yelled at for playing the melody.
Our campfire last night, he kept wanting to do the melody.
The melody helps you start on pitch. That's the biggest thing.
My mom and I just wanted
to start singing, you know.
Play like Girl Scouts and sing.
Yeah. Where you can sing in one key and somebody can play in a different key.
Yeah, we're good at it.
So the ukulele players felt left out, so the publisher started to put ukulele chords in there, and they picked the most basic open position chords possible for the song. So they simplified these songs for the ukulele players. So the ukulele players could play along, you know. Maybe the chord progression was like C major 7, D minor 7. So when they're not gonna put chord grids for that, you know. They would put like the basic chords. Right, and sheet music back then was like basically 8.5 by 11, like standard size paper, with had the chord grids above it, and then the melody line and the piano arrangement of it. Then in the 70s, I guess, or when the guitar started to become real popular, the chord grids changed to guitar grids because ukulele fell out of favor, right? And the sheet music was probably still 8.5 by 11 a little bit. Then the Xerox copy machine came out, and that was originally came out where they could copy a letter size 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So all of a sudden, people just started copying the sheet music and passing it around to their friends. Right? So printers they became wise. The publishers, they increased the size of their books to 9 by 12, so it wouldn't fit on the copy machine. But then copy machines came out where they were bigger and you could reduce it. Yeah. Constant battle still to this day. Right, yeah, so that's the history. So ukulele was the first. Yeah. Now tab originally was lute music, which was like a folk music in the Renaissance era. And they didn't rely on the lute player to like be a trained conservatory musician. They would just write that. I'll put your finger here, play this note here. So I use this analogy. The tab is sort of like paint by numbers. It's telling you where to paint. One day I looked up on the internet, they're like paint by numbers. You know, it's got to be examples of people painting by numbers. It's pretty elaborate. It's pretty good what they do. But I think they sort of go out of the numbers, and they won't pick the blue that came in the little 6 colors that they send with it. But yeah, you want to venture out. Because a lot of the chords are like, the melody is the one thing that won't change. That has to be, the rhythm might change as you're doing it, but the melody, like this is the melody. I mean, no matter, you can play any chord you want over that, and it's still going to sound like Happy Birthday. It just might be a bad arrangement, but it's the melody. But chords, I asked somebody I was studying with once, and, you know, you can figure melodies out by ear, because your ear's going to tell you if it's right or wrong. I asked about chord progressions for a song you don't know. You can play them, a melody, but I've never seen the chords or heard people play the chords. How could you figure out the chords? And you actually can't. You can base it on maybe what the melody is and think, okay, this is the 1 chord maybe, but then where does it go? It could go to anything. All right, so the bottom one now, the 1 chord with the sharp. Oh, I put sharp 2. That should be sharp 1. I have to fix that. Look, I could actually fix it right away. Sharp 1. That's funny. That's not a sharp 2, sorry. Where's it at? Watch this. Erased it from your memory, like Men in Black. All right. So that is a sharp 1/7. So that means C sharp 7. You notice when I actually looked at it and played it before I went off on my chord grid rant, was I played it as a 1 C sharp. I call it C sharp though. Sometimes you have to really look at things and make sure you're actually reading it and not going by memory or intuition. So that's C sharp diminished 7 to the D minor 7 to the G7. So you would do them all up and down the neck. Now here's a little tidbit about that. In this case, C major 7, C sharp diminished 7, D minor 7, G7. That there's a fancy term for that. In this case, C sharp diminished 7th. It's actually a disguised secondary dominant chord. It's actually a 7th chord. It's actually an A7 flat 9 with a C sharp bass note going. So this is actually C major 7 to A7 flat 9 with a C sharp bass note. I can't really get the C sharp in this case. I could do it up here. So I'll do it again. I did it wrong though. C. All right, so you can sort of hear the bass line there. C, C sharp, going to the D minor 7, C7. So even I do it a couple times. You have to really watch and pay attention to your fingers because we were doing this D minor 7 a lot. I wasn't paying attention, and my finger thought it was up here. But right. So that's actually an A7 flat 9 with a C sharp bass note. But just by me saying it, chances are if you write that out, you're not going to get the chord by most players to play it. And chances are you would get an A as the bass note and you want C sharp. So they sort of wrote when you're writing charts and chords and stuff like that, you consider who's going to be playing it and you sort of write down to their level sometimes, I guess. But if you wrote it for a professional, they would say, man, I can play that. It is the shape, though. It is the diminished 7 shape. But as an A7 flat 9 with a C sharp bass note going to D minor, it requires a different chord for soloing than it would as if it's a diminished 7th chord. So I have a book, another book. I didn't put it in here. It's this harmonic analysis book for chord scales and chord substitution. It talks about this disguised secondary dominant chord. When is a diminished 7th chord truly a diminished 7th chord? There's a lesson on it too, naturally. Of course there would be, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's why there's so many lessons. It's like a 2-page lesson, maybe 1 or 2 page for telling you how to figure out when a chord is truly a diminished 7th chord and not just disguised as some other chord. All right, harmony is pretty flexible. All right. Yeah, I didn't show that book up here, but do I have other? Let me see. Hold on. I'm looking around here. Yeah, the next workshop we're doing after this one at 4 is on intervals. That's a good one. A lot of stuff helps.
Someone just said that, I wish I had time now to watch, but is it available later? So
what's that?
It's always, videos are always still on Facebook.
Yeah.
Probably faster to find archived on YouTube.
Yeah. These are pretty time consuming to put together ahead of time, as we do with the graphics and stuff like that. Try to give you stuff you can see versus just telling you, put this finger there, that finger there, stuff like that. And quote unquote in post-production, which we sort of rarely do anyway. But we should go in and we try to trim out the getting started thing and any
audio issues.
Yeah, any goofy banter that was not really necessary. And all of these at some point in the future, I'm going to re-record all of them, and they'll actually be slicker, more graphics, stuff like that. Like this one here would have a play-along tracks to be able to do that. All right.
This says music basics at 4 p.m.
Yeah, that's the intervals one.
Oh,
Part of the music basis is an interval.
Oh, okay, look at that. I will learn something new at 4 o'clock. All right.
Now, not all songs sort of lend themselves really well to using 4-part chords. You know, like a simple folk song with these fancier 4-part chords might not sound really great. You know, if you play like This Old Man with the jazzy 4-part chords and stuff. But by that same token, we should really strive as always. So funny, I always ask my students to show up for lessons. I ask them, first question I always will ask them, and I get funny remarks sometimes. I ask them, how's the music business? And they'll laugh and chuckle, even like the second lesson. I say, well, you're in the music business now. You're playing whatever the instrument is, ukulele, guitar, you're being a musician. You start out as maybe like a ukulele player, a guitar player, then slowly you want to evolve into a musician who happens to play this instrument, that instrument. And you're trying to build your skill set, your skill level and knowledge up. So you don't want to really steer. You want just learn this more advanced stuff. Not even advanced, it's just the next steps and stuff, you know, versus the dumbing down of songs. You'll see it all the time. I saw it the other day, you know, they'll take a song, somebody will take like a Satin Dial. Right, and they'll, I call it dumbing down, but they'll simplify it so that you'll play it like a D minor 7, G7. And again, because a song is the melody and the lyrics, anybody playing that like a cigarette holder, it'll sound like the song because of the melody and the lyrics. But the background, some people listening to it might be like, but they're familiar with that song as like a Duke Ellington band. They didn't play simplified stuff when they did that arrangement. They were doing these nice 4-part chords, lush harmony. Right? So it sounds nicer. And then singing over something like that, you know, which I can't do, but you know, a cigarette, a hold of a Joe. I don't really sing, but it's just going to sound even better. So don't simplify the song. Unsimplify the musician. Bring them up, because this stuff is actually really not that hard. It's just a little time consuming to get, your fingers is the hard part. Getting those fingers to do what they're supposed to do. Now I would advocate just taking these, maybe pick one of them a week, do it in one key, right? Then maybe pick another key. Now I would maybe do 2 keys on the ukulele, only because one of the voicings, when you get high up the neck here, like say if I did D minor 7, G7, C major 7, I don't have a C major 7 up there, right? Like C major 7, G7, C major 7, open position. So the next one I'd have, oh wait, we're doing D minor, right?
I think so.
Yeah, D minor 7, G7, C major 7, D minor 7, G7, C major 7. Now it gets tight up here. If you're on a concert or a soprano, these would be really hard to do, and you might avoid it, thinking that I'm never going to play this up here. And chances are you're not going to play in the key of C major way up here. D minor 7, G7. It's really tight. You might flub notes. There's a lower chance of nailing it way up here. But they said we're going to do it in F. Ooh, G minor 7, C7, F major 7. Now, you do need to be able to do it though. So if I'd pick 2 keys, I'd pick C and F, or C and G. All right. So take each progression, maybe the 2, 5, 1. If you're doing it in C, it's D minor 7, G7, C major 7. you're doing it in the key of F. It's G minor 7, C7, F major 7. So G minor 7. Now the same fingers will work. So G minor 7, C7, F major 7. Right? So 2 keys will allow you then to easily move things around. Make it minor. G minor 7, flat 5. G7. Now, one thing you'll find out a lot is the 5 chords in minor, the 7th chords, 5 chords, are rarely just straight vanilla 7th chords. In fact, there's a saying amongst jazz musicians, never play a straight 7th chord. Make it like a 9th, 13th, 11th, or alter it, flat 9s, sharp 9s, flat 5s, sharp 5s. And in a minor progression, like say G minor 7, flat 5, C7, you would sharp to 5, it just sounds great, to F minor 7. It sets it up just so well. Versus this. It doesn't even sound good. Now, so our ear is really, you have to guide the ear of the listener, and the listener is you too as you're playing it, so, right? It also will give you the correct names for chords. Take a song like, St. James Infirmary, E minor 7, B7, E minor 7. Now the B7 is the 5 chord in the key of E minor, and it can be preceded by the 2 chord. Now a 2 chord is easy to get in any key. It's just the next letter, a whole step up. So if we're in E minor, the next letter is F, E to F, it's F sharp, the whole step. So that means F sharp minor 7, flat 5. So now you actually will see a lot of people when they're playing this, especially on ukulele in this song, St. James Infirmary. E minor 7, B7, E minor 7, B7, E minor 7. They'll call this a D7, a D9. Well, I always joke and say if I'm gigging and the bass player plays a D, I'm going to have words with them at the end of the song. That's not.
Or maybe at the end of the set.
There's a famous story of Barney Kessel, this famous jazz guitarist back in the 50s. He's actually the one that discovered Lyle Ritz playing ukulele, demoing it in a music store, and told Lyle that, after he gets back from the army, look me up. We could do something, And that's how the Lyle came to record 2 ukulele CDs for Verve, was because of Barney Kessel. Well, he was a famous jazz guitarist, won a lot of polls and stuff, but he would tour the country. So one day, a newspaper reporter was interviewing Barney, and they asked him, says, Barney, I see that you're touring now, and I see some dates you're playing as a solo artist, and other dates you're playing with a trio. He says, what determines whether you're playing as a trio or a solo? And Barney said, morning rehearsal. Because he wouldn't travel with a bass player or drummer. You pick up local musicians, and you're playing standard songs. So if they didn't cut it at rehearsal, he's playing solo that night. Fellow I studied with Chuck Anderson. He asked Myra Flowen, who was the musical director for Lawrence Welk, and Lawrence Welk would tour. And Chuck played the Valley Forge Music Fair as the staff guitarist, and Lawrence Welk would play there. And Chuck always said that was one of his best gigs because the music was just so diverse. But he asked Myra Flowen, he said, Myra, I know when you hit like Chicago, Detroit, New York, because they would just travel with a small set of musicians and the dancers and singers, and they'd pick up the local band. And Chuck asked Myron that same thing. Like when you hit Philadelphia, you're going to get good musicians that you can put together the orchestra and band you need. But when you hit these small towns, he asked him, what do you do when you can't really pick up the musicians? He says, I just turn up my accordion. He has to work harder. So it's actually pretty easy on ukulele with these kinds of chords because it's not as daunting as a instrument capable of playing a lot more string sets. All right. So send any questions your way.
Your way.
Yeah. I'm going to send questions your way. Send questions to us, Curt at learningukulele.com or Funky Frets at Gmail. Kelly will get it. Kelly's better at checking the email than I am. Get a lot of spam. I do anyway. So, all right. And we'll next week we'll figure out what we're going to do next week.
In the meantime, I'll see you at 4
We'll
o'clock.
probably take some songs.
Do some more playing. Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, so just pick one. Like we do the 1-6-2-5. Master that. The key of C and the key of F. All right. So adios.
Bye.
Enjoy.